Where did they get that photograph from? Buongiorno, bienvenue, willkommen, hola. Hello everybody, assalamu alaikum. I would just like to say how wonderful it is to be back with you this year. And I've already met some of you in preparation for today. And it was an incredibly wonderful comment that said to me, it feels like coming home. And I hope for some of you that have been to this event before, it does feel like coming home. Because home is wherever community is, and this is a very, very powerful community of people. And it's a privilege and an honor to be with you once again this year. So, inclusion, beyond inclusion, what do I think that could mean? Well, for me, inclusion is being included, right? But actually, we don't just want to be included, do we? Surely we want an opportunity to contribute, to participate, to co-design, to co-produce the future that we all depend upon. And so we don't just want to be included, we want to play an active role in shaping our futures. And this is where the co-design and the co-production that we require for the future happens. So, my name is Peter Holbrook. I'm first of all just going to tell you where I'm from. Just going to adjust my mic so it's not rubbing on my beard. Better? Let's hope so. And I am the CEO of Social Enterprise UK. And I've been doing Opus Open Camp with a brilliant team from Opus for the last 4 or 5 years. I'm not sure why they keep on inviting me back, but I am absolutely thrilled that they do. This year we have lots of things that are exciting for you, but I come from the UK and I have some of my team with me for the first time this year. So where is Francesca and where are Sophia and Sabira? Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for being here with me. Social enterprise, I hope it's a term you're familiar with. Social business, it's a very, very kind of fundamental principle. Civil society sometimes tends to focus on the social policies required to heal our communities and our nation. Social enterprise is the economics that drives prosperity, but also has created some of the greatest challenges in our world. And social enterprise for me and for the UK has become a fundamental part of not just civil society, but is innovating and coming up with the courage and the ideas to reshape the very kind of foundations of our economic thinking. The Sustainable Development Goals published by the United Nations are a pretty good starting point for where we think our planning and design should begin. My presentation this year is about the power of purpose, why understanding your purpose, knowing your purpose, and declaring your purpose is so important. And also the courage to lead. We talk about leadership frequently. There are many people in the world that we call leaders, but what is the fundamental architecture of good leadership? We'll be exploring a little bit of that with you today as well. The Sustainable Development Goals were created back at the start of the millennium, and they were originally called the Millennium Development Goals. And one of the goals was the most contentious. It took days and days and days for world leaders to agree that these would be the 17 goals that we took forward. And the most contentious goal of all was reducing inequality. Because actually, the most powerful people in the world have a vested interest in an unequal world. It's an unequal world that allows them to retain the wealth and the power that they have. And this notion that pushing equality, creating greater equity for people, particularly the poorest and those at the margins of society, has always been a contentious ambition to hold. But through negotiation, that's what we got to, and we are now globally committed to reducing inequality, as well as tackling all of the other ills around our world. But actually tackling inequality is going to prove to be a real challenge. Tax isn't working. Governments are being challenged. And actually what we are continuing to see for the last 20 to 30 years is a constant increase in inequality throughout the world. The world has always needed change, and when I was born in 1971, it had only been 4 years since being a homosexual had stopped being illegal. And I grew up in an environment that was very hostile to people of my ilk. But I was also born into a world that was already being challenged around climate, around deforestation, holes in the ozone layer, apartheid in South Africa. And so I was born into a world that needed change, and I set about trying to create that. For those of you, for all of you that are younger than me, you've been born into a world that faces even more complex and dramatic challenges. And it's going to require the best of all of us to work our way through those challenges. I started out as an activist. I believed that the way to show my disdain for the world, my anger at the injustice in the world, was to take to the streets and to wear the badges and the t-shirts to highlight my concerns. But I quickly understood that actually the way we change the world is through ultimately challenging the power and where the power resides in the world. So I was an activist. I was born a baby. And last week I was in Downing Street talking to the new Prime Minister about the world that we might create, both domestically within the United Kingdom, but as one of the powerful nations in the world, what we can do to influence the future global economy and move it to a sustainable space. Now, it wasn't just in 1971 when I was born that the world needed problem solving. And I just think it's fascinating that there have been people like you and I for hundreds of years, for thousands of years, since the origin of humanity, that have been trying to reshape and redefine what economic growth and economic prosperity really means. Here we see some early examples back from the 17th century, when slavery was an epidemic around the world, the treatment of our brothers and sisters, an appalling reflection on our own lack of values. But even then, there were people trying to identify ways and means in which things could change. And here we see from the 17th century glass sugar bowls that people could purchase in grocery stores that were free of slavery and free of exploitation. And actually in the UK, back in 1848, we saw the origin of the first world's cooperative, the Rochdale Pioneers, who formed a cooperative shop based on the 7 cooperative principles to ensure that people, ordinary people, weren't being exploited by the food producers at that time. So much has changed in our world, but much has not. And fair trade sugar has been replaced with a whole variety of products and services that you can find on every supermarket shelf now. And the growth in social business, in ethical business, in business that actually puts humanity and the planet at the heart of its decision-making has been consistently growing. Not just here in Italy, but it's been growing here in Italy, but it's been growing right across the world. And you are the people that are creating that growth. You are the people that will define the economy of the future. For me, I started talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, and in terms of the power of design and the importance of design and purpose. This is where we can take those 17 challenges that the world faces that have been articulated by the United Nations and our global leaders. We put those challenges and our thoughts into our minds, into our business minds and business brains, and we ask ourselves, when we work, when we innovate, when we think, how can we put those challenges into our thinking and actually make a contribution to resolving those challenges rather than simply thinking, as people traditionally always have, about maximizing profits and one's own self-interest. The world is truly challenged, and I think we've just heard that the hottest day in Catania was very, very recent, and actually we've just had the wettest September in history in the UK. The world is a very fragile ecosystem built on interdependency, and we are a long way from achieving that goal of working and living in harmony with the planet that supports us. We see, even last year, more virgin plastic being created than the year before. So despite us knowing about all the challenges of plastic waste, the challenges of single-use plastic in particular, we can't stop ourselves from creating ever more waste, non-recyclable waste. And the consequences of this are just accumulating in our oceans, they're accumulating in our food chain, and ultimately causing not just the oceans harm, but each and every one of us untold harm. And we see the vulnerability of our communities and our towns and the prospect of more pandemics challenging us and challenging our way of life. All of these silences I'm giving you might sound very dramatic, but it's just because I'm troubling to get my slides to move on. Right now we see conflict around the world, and I'm not here to make any points about particular origins of responsibility, but we see the devastation happening across the Middle East right now in places that I've visited, places like Lebanon and Beirut, the challenges in Iran, Israel, Palestine, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, in places like Jordan, but also in places like Yemen. Right across the world, we are seeing the absolute most appalling treatment of our brothers and sisters. And we have to ask ourselves, don't we all deserve more? One of the challenges, I think, that drives conflict, and that's well evidenced in terms of driving conflict, is the historic and continued growth in wealth and income inequality. Here you can see that, 6% of the world's worth is shared just by 80% of the world's population. And the concentration of such vast amounts of wealth is in an ever smaller minority of hands. And this is historically a very, very bad place for humanity. And traditionally, it's only kind of huge, devastating events, either war or conflict or natural disaster, that creates that kind of levelling and that new equality that's needed. We don't want to wait for an environmental catastrophe or a global catastrophe or a third world war to flatten the inequality that the world currently exists within. And yet, academics and economists tell us it's the only way we will achieve the shared prosperity we need to overcome the environmental challenges that we face. And as we see that concentration of wealth go up and up and up, we see those that hold the wealth are ever less likely to pay tax. And tax pays for public services, it pays for work integration, it pays for clean streets, for education, for health, for civil protection. And yet we have an abundance and indeed more wealth than the world has ever seen, and yet every government across every part of the world is telling us as citizens it doesn't have enough money to give us what we need. Things have to change, and for me, one of the big challenges in the world at the moment is the relationship between wealth and politics. We have to address we can't just create more social businesses and hope everything goes away. As leaders, we really have to face the fundamental challenges that are causing us to make poor decisions for our futures. And the relationship between power and politics is far too damaging for us to ignore. We have to unravel the relationship between corporate power and our politicians. And I think what you can see in the US right now is that real challenge between how politicians are dependent on the patronage of the wealthy. Now, I'd like to see some of those people face the same sort of justice that everyone here would probably have to face. And yet it seems to me as if these people are beyond justice. And if we give them more power, they will put themselves even further beyond justice. These are people that are of great threats to us, and they also create great comedy, right? But let's not forget the real threat that sits behind sometimes these clowns and comedic people. And it's not just the politicians, is it? I mean, anyone here a fan of Elon Musk? Anyone drive a Tesla? Well, aren't you an enlightened bunch? I have to say, well done all of you. But you know, this man, if you look on social media, is both treated as a hero and a villain. And actually, the world's becoming much, much more tribal and far less discerning and thoughtful about interrogating the ethics, the values, and the contributions of such people. We have global leaders that are now more dangerous than we've seen in perhaps 50, 60, 70 years. And we have this proliferation of hugely powerful people that hold more wealth than whole countries. And we heard about how the island of Sicily, and actually the whole country of Italy, has been challenged by the numbers of migrants coming to Italy. What we know is that these are victims of our economic system. They are not the perpetrators of crime. And we have to embrace our brothers and sisters, wherever they come from the world, understanding the terror and the fear that they are leaving behind them. The challenges they make and the risks they take by getting to the West, to Italy, to Greece, to Spain, to the UK, are vast. And when they come, they are faced with huge challenges and often a great deal of exclusion, not inclusion. We have to recognize that migrants have always been the source of great innovation and economic prosperity. These are people that come with ideas, that work hard, that integrate, and that actually begin to repair and regenerate our broken and failed towns and cities and bring life back to some of our communities. Refugees should be welcomed, and they should be assets, and they should be seen as our brothers and sisters fleeing from difficult circumstance. They don't bring with them problems. They are escaping the problems that often have originated in countries like the UK and America and others. So respect all refugees and treat everyone here with the love and warmth and the welcome that you've treated me today. We have some incredible people. This is a diverse conference. I would ask you to get to know as many people as you can over the next 2 or 3 days, because that will also support you in terms of understanding your purpose and also help you in your journey of leadership. The problem with free market capitalism is that it's predisposed on chasing resources that are finite. And as you can see in this particular slide, what happens when people fight after scarce resources is everyone loses. There isn't enough to go around, and we end up destroying the very little that we actually had. So there's an alternative, and it's something that many, many people have talked about, and that alternative is social enterprise. Given the range of challenges we face, whether that's the lack of water, the degradation of our soil, whatever it is we think about, you can understand why particularly young people, but us all, are affected by this mental health epidemic. You can see why poor mental health has been driven to the brink, and how we continually look to medicalize illnesses that ultimately have a social core. So we're stretched, we're challenged, but we've been stretched and we've been challenged before. And actually, this is the time, as I've been saying for all my life, for 40 years plus now, that actually this is the time we need in history to come together, to understand the complexity and the interdependency of the challenges we face, and actually, starting with purpose, making a global commitment to address them. Not just leave it for our politicians, not just leave it for our charities, but ensure that every business, that every citizen is engaged in solving these problems. Sorry for the inconvenience, but all of us here are trying to change the world. And I believe that with the power, with the collaboration and cooperation that we can have here over these next 4 days, that we can make a real difference. It's not just what happens here over the next 4 days, it's what we take home. It's taking messages back to people in our home communities, in our countries at home, and becoming evangelists for a different way of working and thinking. I've said quite a lot that probably makes you feel like, oh fuck, why did I come here? This is really depressing. Well, let me assure you, there is a lot of reason to be hopeful. There are an amazing bunch of things already happening in the businesses and the organisations that you represent. But I get the opportunity to travel around quite a bit, and I see the reasons for hope and for a future that we can be proud of. I see that people understand and are beginning to realise that we can't use the same design thinking to solve the problems as we did when we created them. We need to think afresh. This is where innovation can really take place, at the design stage. And so I believe that if we really think about these goals, particularly the one around addressing inequality, we have a chance of taking these ideas, these challenges, and embedding them in the decisions and the choices that we will make in the years and decades to come. I think you're all leaders, right? You're all leaders, you know. I was described as a leader. Well, if I'm a leader, you're also leaders, because a leader helps others to be inspired, to dream more, to do more, and become more. And I know because of what you're all doing, and because I've met many of you before, that that's exactly what you're doing. This year, I would ask that you go from being a leader to considering becoming a great leader. And a great leader takes people to where they want to be. A great leader takes people where they don't necessarily want to go, but where they ought to be. So there's a real challenge for you. Not just leading your own organisation, but taking your ideas to communities and to people who might not necessarily be aligned, and to convince them of your way of thinking. And that will turn you from a leader into a great leader. And I think we also must acknowledge that we have to accept disappointment. There will always be frustrations and there will always be barriers and challenges. But actually, we must never lose hope that together we can achieve something that we haven't yet achieved. And here you see a great little quote from Stacey Adams. And Stacey says, effective leaders must be truth seekers. And that requires a willingness to understand truths other than our own. And that's also an opportunity for these conferences, right? Challenge yourselves. I'm 53, I think I know it all, but I don't. There's an opportunity to be challenged here over these next few days and to expand your mind and change your view. And anyone that comes out with a different view from what they arrived with is also a hero and a leader in my mind. So why does design matter? Design matters because intentionality matters. When we often start about business, or we think about business, or we learn about business, we think about profit, we think about loss, and we think about what it takes to grow a business. What I would say is we need to start applying those challenges and principles around the Sustainable Development Goals into the DNA of our businesses. And I know many of you are already doing that. But many of you will be thinking about a specific issue, about building wealth in your community, or about addressing an environmental issue. The real challenge is to make decisions in business that are making a positive contribution across all 17 of those SDGs. It sounds really tough. It sounds almost impossible, but it's not, and it's fun. You can start doing it. You can start thinking about how every decision in your business can positively contribute towards one of those 17 SDGs. And you build and you build and you build. And you're going to hear from someone a little bit later, after we've had a little bit of a break, who is absolutely addressing every single one of the 17 goals through their business. So design matters. Build it into your business DNA. There's an example I wanted to just choose here. Why would we ever build prisons that are for profit? Why would we ever do that? what's the purpose of a prison? The purpose of a prison might be to protect people, it might be to rehabilitate people, it might be to keep communities safe. But why would you ever want to build a prison that was purely for profit? Because what would happen in that situation? Security might be compromised, the rehabilitation might be compromised. What would be the motivation for a prison that is run solely for profit to actually rehabilitate anyone? Surely it would be in the interests of a prison that was run for profit to see people go out and create more crime so that they come back to the prison. So why do we put profit in prisons? Does anyone in their country have private prisons? So in the UK now, about 50 to 60% of all prisons are privately run and operated. Does anyone have that in their country? Surely the UK is not the only company to introduce private prisons. There's one over there, another one over there. In Australia, we've got them. I can see my friends from Australia have also got private prisons. When we start thinking about the profit motive, it's perverse. We wouldn't just put that in prisons, but we wouldn't put it into anything, would we? I mean, do we really want to put profit above human health, above the welfare and the rights of our workers, around the community? Does profit really usurp all of these other considerations? In my mind, profit had a role when prosperity was the thing that would improve quality of life. We're at a point now where more profit does not correlate to a higher quality of life. We now need to have a primary purpose that is about human well-being. And profit may be necessary in business, but it shouldn't be the primary goal of any business in 2024. We can, of course, put anything we want into the rules of our business. We can put millions of people into work. That can be our commitment. It can be about work. It can be about climate change. It can be about racial equality. It can be about all of those things, and it can be about more of those things. But I do recognize that many of you are already doing this. But are you doing it with your heads and your minds, or are you reflecting your purpose beyond profit into the rules of your business, into your business DNA? And that's what I think is so, so important, because ultimately we are making a decision about enhancing people's lives or operating for investor profit. And for me, the future of business has to be human and planetary well-being. Are any of you using Ecosia as a search engine? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, a few more. Well, you are the enlightened ones, and I'm going to give you all a big kiss afterwards. How many of you are still using Google? If you're not using Google and you're not using Ecosia, what are you using? Maybe you're not using the internet at all. My point is, there is a new generation of choices that we can all make. And if we're not making them, we are the enlightened ones, then how can we expect anyone else to make them too? Ecosia is a search engine, and so far, 217 million trees have been planted as a consequence. What happens when you search with Google? We all know that you're the product. It's not the search engine that's the product. You're the product because it's taking your data. But actually, when you're using Google, you're exacerbating the income gap, the wealth gap. You're driving a whole range of negative outcomes, whereas a simple switch to something like Ecosia can be a regenerative decision and almost a political decision. And so wherever you look, always look for the social enterprise alternative. There will always be one. Even if it's smartphones, it's not just about work integration. Smartphones have a terrible impact on the world. Fairphone is I think on version 3 or version 4 now, is slowly but surely delivering quality, good price, environmental sustainability, a modular model, which means that batteries, cameras can all be upgraded individually. This is the future, and these business models are getting the support, particularly from young people. And community energy it has become a huge, huge growth area for social business. Because when you take control of your energy, you're taking control of your local infrastructure. And when you take control of your local infrastructure, you're taking back control of your community. And so when you can start not just to think about the social enterprise pens or pencils or notepads, but you can start thinking about the role of social enterprise in delivery of everything and anything, you can start to see a future that's equal, that's got hope, and that hopefully will overcome the challenges we're all facing. Now, I've only got 2 minutes left, and I can't see what the next slide is. Sesame Street, there you go. Does anyone remember Sesame Street? What's remarkable about Sesame Street is Sesame Street, as a US children's television show, had a principal social purpose, and that was to help educate kids in urban America, kids who were traditionally of black origin. And Sesame Street absolutely brought diversity and difference and said it's okay. It targeted black children in particular because of the educational divide in the US at that time. Now, Sesame Street is over 50 years old. It's older than me. And it's still delivering the impact that it always set out to do. It hasn't lost its mission because its purpose was built into the DNA of its business. Its purpose was to tackle those racial disadvantages in early years. Who gives a crap about what I'm telling you? Who gives a crap is not a question I'm asking you. It's actually a roll of toilet paper and kitchen towels, all in funky designs that are distributing profits to help tackle sanitary poverty all around the world. We've got more different social enterprise water companies than we probably need, but they are in abundance. There are now hundreds of different water producers selling bottled water in an environmentally conscious way and in a way that is reinvesting profits to tackle the environmental climate change. And we're seeing ever greater variety of uses for kind of waste products that others just discard. And so there is real hope on the horizon. The power of purpose is important. The innovation that's being driven to develop new products and services that actually make a positive impact rather than a negative impact are happening all around us. And there is lots and lots of reasons to be hopeful. We can take the inspiration from these businesses and these models and apply them ourselves. We're not any longer asking you to go and be kind of incredible entrepreneurs that come up with a whole new idea. Take what's already out there, plagiarize it, and make it work for you. Because it's only when there are literally hundreds of these conferences going on in thousands of towns and cities around the world where we have the opportunity to really build the revolution that we have the potential to. It's happening here. You're the pioneers. You're at the start of your journey. But we are collectively working together to address these challenges and go from beyond inclusion to building a healthy planet and a prosperous world. There's still a lot to do. There's still vast challenges around gender inequality, racial inequality that we have to tackle. But I think by being role models, by having the courage to be the leaders we want to be, by taking on the big challenges and recognizing that even if we're doing well, we're even then not doing good enough, is a great place to be. So let the conversations begin over these next 3 or 4 days. They are valuable opportunities to learn, to expand our thinking, to change our minds, to think differently, to be bolder, to be braver, and to think about what more our businesses can achieve. The future can be a really positive one. There is hope. There is 100 reasons to be cheerful. It's not all so depressing. Every challenge creates an opportunity, and it's those opportunities together over these next 3 or 4 days that we can begin to solve. There is an opportunity to rewild our world, to reforest it and create an abundance of nature, but also of human prosperity alongside it. And we can sort out our oceans. I'm completely convinced that we can rewild our oceans like we can rewild our forests. New batteries, please. In the end, we can put love into everything that we do. Love isn't a word that you tend to use in business very often, is it? But I think love and kindness are the words that we should use much more frequently when we talk about business. Is it okay to have love and kindness in business? Damn right it is. I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of Mohammed Yunus. Mohammed Yunus, last year, was facing prison. I came to this conference and I asked you all to sign a letter. He was facing 6 months imprisonment in Bangladesh. He came to visit the UK in February and in March this year and tried to raise political support to keep him free. In May this year, he became the Prime Minister of Bangladesh. Now, Mohammed Yunus is the OG, he's the originator of social business in a modern context. He has won a Nobel Peace Prize. He has lifted 2 to 3 million families out of poverty in Bangladesh. He's my friend, he's Eleanor's friend, he's your friend, and through his courage of leadership, through his integrity and his commitment to social business, he has been elevated to a powerful office, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh. I can't wait to come and see what you're doing next. Like, no pressure, but if he can do it, you can do it. So go back to your towns and communities, think about the businesses you're going to run, but also think about the nations you're going to lead, because it's going to require a social entrepreneurship of your caliber to take us through the challenges that your towns, your homes, and your countries will face. Thank you so much. I've been Peter Holbrook. Enjoy the rest of your time with this conference. Thank you so much. Thank you.